Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Vince Vitali. He is the Vice President for Strategy and Business Development at NextGate. Vince, thanks for joining me today.
Great, Dr. Nick. Thanks for having me.
So we're coming into HIMSS. There's lots of focus on it. Obviously, we're going to get an opportunity to talk about some of the things going on at HIMSS from a NextGate perspective. Tell us a little bit, just to share with the listeners, about you and your background. One of the things that I know is you've been to one or two HIMSS before.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've been to quite a few. Actually, my background goes back to the provider side. I started many years ago working for a hospital and health system here in the Chicago area. I spent about 9 years as a manager and director within the information technology area before being drawn away to a vendor and working for a vendor on the health information network strategy that they were putting together. And I did that for several years before going into consulting with a healthcare consulting firm, and worked for them for many years as well. And then ended up going back to the provider side about a dozen years ago in various CIO positions at a number of different hospitals. So then I most recently joined NextGate just this past August, back to the vendor side, really to help them understand better what's out there and what's going on in the day-to-day world of the CIO and most health systems, and help them strategize about how they could meet the needs of those markets that they're working within.
Fantastic. So for the benefit of the listeners, NextGate essentially prides itself in matching patients, one of the most pervasive and challenging problems that we're faced in healthcare. Can you share a little bit of the background and how that's achieved?
Yeah, NextGate has its roots in the interoperability and integration world. Many of its founders were working for the last 25 years on some of the biggest challenges of interoperability. One of the things they found was the need for accurate and ubiquitous patient matching. If you read the literature, if you look at the studies, anywhere from 15 to 18 or higher % of a large health system's medical records are either duplicated or erroneous or fragmented. So they realized this was a critical issue for health systems to address, and so that's how NextGate was formed. And they've developed their EMPI, or Enterprise Master Patient Index engine, the technology developed over the last 25 years. And it's been refined and upgraded ever since. We've added a couple other capabilities as well. We've added our provider registry as well as our relation registry. And that kind of creates a three-legged stool that we like to base our solutions on. But yeah, as you said, if you can't do patient matching right, pretty much nothing else matters. If you're not
you aren't kidding, because hey, if I haven't got the right patient in front of me connected to the medical record that I'm looking at, it seems a little bit challenging to be able to decide what therapy, what's gone on. It's like this fundamental issue, but it's persisted for years. We've really been sort of challenged with that. So coming into HIMSS, what are you talking about? What's going on at NextGate and what's special?
Well, we see our solutions as really addressing a lot of the business problems that our clients are facing. There's a lot of coordination of care issues that are out there, and our products allow the patient to be accurately identified so that they can be treated across the full spectrum. As you already know, I'm sure the healthcare system itself is expanding. The number of players, the number of sources, the number of sites of care are ever expanding. And when you talk about one of the buzzwords in the industry right now, which is social determinants of health. People talk about how the care is extending into the community for non-clinical services like housing or transportation, et cetera. So how do you create this single patient identifier that can expand beyond the walls of the health system? And that's one of the things I think is going to be a key player or a key component, a topic within the HIMSS floor space. The other thing is analytics. I think that if you're not identifying the patient, how are you actually doing your quality reporting, doing your analytical reporting, either financially or clinically? And so we think analytics is another key use case for our technology and our solutions. I mentioned patient safety is always number one with everybody. So again, if you can identify the right patient and identify a single medical record and a full comprehensive longitudinal record, you're going to be able to make better clinical decisions and have better outcomes.
So it's interesting you bring up that sort of, the integration of other activities. So, there's a lot of talk, I think, lots of positive focus on analytics. We've got all this additional data, but, as you rightly point out, if we're not accurately identifying and linking the patient and the records together, then, there's much less value to that activity. And what I hear you saying is that NextGate is blending all of that material. And when I think about blending, I immediately fall to whiskey, as most people would imagine, which brings me to this other exciting opportunity that we have at HIMSS. Do you want to share a little bit of that? Sure.
I would like to formally announce that NextGate will be hosting a whiskey tasting in our booth 3128 at HIMSS. That will be that whiskey tasting will be actually moderated by yourself. So that will be an exciting opportunity for people to hear you speak not on healthcare and informatics, but on another passion of yours, which is whiskey.
And I know you share it because you said that you're actually that's one of your passions. Tell us a little bit about your personal experiences with whiskey, because for me it sort of pervades everything I do. People can see that online. It's certainly one of my areas of focus and interest for the positive value that it brings in terms of Uska Baith, or the water of life, as they say in Gaelic.
Yes. My history is I'll tell you a quick story. My father, who was a blended Scotch whiskey drinker, found me well hungover after a night out, having mixed my American whiskey with lemonade, or Sprite, or 7-Up, as we say in the States. And he chastised me and said, "You never mix anything with your whiskey. You drink it straight, or at worst with a little water." And he said, "And you drink Scotch whiskey." And so he started me on that path. I have 3 older brothers, and we've all been drinking Scotch whiskey since I can remember. And we've gone to the single malt, what we call single malt Scotch here, but real true Scotch whiskey. And I've been partaking, I should say, for decades now. And I have my own little collection of single malts, Highlands, Lowlands, Islay, even some Speyside. So I do enjoy it, and I enjoy it in moderation, but in different aspects.
So I'm just going to make a prediction for him. So for those of you that didn't catch it, you can get the sign up. We'll put that in the blog post. You can go sign up for an opportunity to join the lucky souls that will be guided through a romp through the Highlands. And as you heard from Vince, we'll be sharing a little bit of a Highland whiskey. We have an Islay whiskey that many people will sort of connect with the Lafroigs and the smokiness and the peatness. We've also got a Northern Coastal that has a fantastically interesting background because it's right next door to a closed distillery and inherits some of their goodness from the around the areas. And I'm extraordinarily excited, and I will be putting out a teaser video that will give you some sense of all of that. So for me, this is just a perfect opportunity, and a perfect opportunity for NextGate customers to sign up, come join us. We'll be experiencing this live, nothing better than that. And I feel like I'm going to have Vince on stage with me to help me through some of these tastings with that background.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So moving on to some of the latest news, and I think from the current activities that I'm reading online, one of the things, it wasn't a very recent announcement, but it sort of started to trend just recently, was this announcement from Experian, who essentially put out a press release, and if I paraphrase it correctly, they said, we've got an index that matches patients, but you can't see it, but we're very good at it. Am I getting the sort of pretext of that essentially correct?
Yeah, that's what I read as well. In the press release, it said that they have created a universal identifier for every patient in the U.S., but that is not available to the patient to see or use. So I think that's a very interesting kind of approach. And we've always viewed Experian as kind of a reference data provider, you know, having a lot of financial and credit information, and as being an add-on to our EMPI, you know, capability.
Perfect for blending in, right?
Exactly, right on topic. Yeah, a way to blend that data into our existing EMPI engine. And we use a partner called GBG out of the UK that provides us with our reference data that is very similar to what Experian provides. So we have that capability. I don't understand necessarily why they would announce kind of a product that the user can't access, but I'm waiting to see what the result of that is. There's also, I would say, the backlash I've heard online is people are concerned with privacy, and with a company, even though Experian will say that it's free of charge, you have to basically donate, if you will, your patient demographic data to them to allow them to run it through their system to find, if they can, an identifier that matches and provide that identifier back. So I think people are rightfully skeptical about providing that information to an organization. And there's been lots of breaches in our industry, and a lot of personal data that's been leaked to nefarious actors. So I think it's something to be concerned about and something to take with a grain of salt.
So for those of you just joining, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and today also a whiskey librarian, and I'm talking to Vince Vitali. He is the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at NextGate. We were just talking about the Experian release and, you know, questioning what exactly was contained. I think, you know, obviously a concern around privacy, the security of that data, and specifically the inability to access it seems a little bit troubling, just because we know that there are errors in all of this. I think, you know, Vince, as you cited right at the beginning, 15% plus of medical records with errors, and we're matching this, but we can't go in and test that. So a little bit concerning. As you think of it, you're essentially bringing in that information into the NextGate world so that you have this universe of data and you apply essentially controls to deliver that to customers. Is that a fair sort of summary?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're providing the capability to resolve this information internally to the organization, not externally. So I mean, it's in the power and the control of the organization itself to analyze this information, even if they're using referential data from a third party or externally. That data is brought into the organization and used internally to do the matching. So, you know, you don't have to worry about that information being exposed in the public domain or concentrated or aggregated in any one single commercial vendor's, you know, database.
Absolutely. So as we look forward to March, or maybe we don't. Well, I don't know. I don't want to presuppose whether people look forward to HIMSS or to March or any of those things. I look forward to warmer days because I live in a colder climate currently. I'm always excited to go to HIMSS in part because of the networking, the opportunities. We've heard lots of things are coming in terms of the release of information, interoperability. That's sort of a domain for NextGate. As you think about what's coming for you as an organization and your expectations, and given you've had this long experience, what are you looking out for at HIMSS? What should we be focusing on when we arrive there, aside obviously from the opportunity to taste whiskey with Dr. Nick and NextGate?
Yeah, that's number one on my list. But
it is on mine too, just to be clear.
Yeah, no, I think we've been talking about patient-centered care for a lot of years within the healthcare community, but I really think that we're getting to the point where that's becoming more the reality. And I really think the relationship of the patient with their care providers and with their data is really going to be what we see in the next year and beyond, be the important factor in how patients are treated and how outcomes are delivered. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about value-based care and how we're driving more towards quality than volume, and I think that's the government is pushing us that way. Other payers are pushing that way with their reimbursement models. But value-based care is based on quality. And so I think to get the outcomes necessary, people are going to have to put the patient at the center, understand the relationships of that patient to their provider, to the organizations that support those providers, as well as to the data itself. And I really think that's going to be kind of the mantra going forward, is keeping the patient at the center and understanding those relationships. And from our perspective, that's kind of where we fit, making sure that the patient is at the center, that the patient data is identified accurately and shared correctly, and that information goes forth to other providers in an accurate way to make decisions. So, I mean, I like all the talk about machine learning, and I like all the talk about artificial intelligence and precision medicine, but bottom line is you really got to know who the patient is before you can do any of those things.
It starts with the individual. It always does, and that's been a sort of recurring theme with this personalized medicine. It's I think we all want personalized medicine. At least if you don't want it, I think maybe you're not understanding what that means. But we want it down to the individual level. But for that to be actually achievable, you've got to correctly identify both your own data, but also reconcile that with the large swathes of data. And we're expanding all of this at this point. There's huge elements to this. And one of the things that really intrigues me is how do we incorporate in data sources from these SDOH that, there's a lot of talk about, I think, appropriate focus. Is NextGate thinking about that part of it?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. We've already have worked with some of our customers who are in the public health space and are dealing with those issues on a regular basis. Things like incorporating healthcare data from correctional facilities, incorporating mental health data, because mental health, I think, is one of the areas that I think we'll see the biggest improvement in because really mental health and clinical health go together hand in glove. And I really think that more organizations are realizing that, marrying the data between their clinical settings and their mental health and behavioral settings to treat the whole person. So I see that as another area from outside the hospital, typically, that will be incorporated with hospital data much more readily. There's all kinds of other programs that are out there as far as transportation insecurity or food insecurity or housing insecurity. And all of those social service agencies we have to figure out a way to make sure that we account for that information with the clinical data, because it's really affecting whole populations.
So it's interesting you bring that up with mental health, and I think it's appropriate. I'm sure people would want to know because there's always pushback around this, both from the clinical community as well as patients. I don't want, my brain health and depression to be transmitted across to everybody. If people need to know appropriately for clinical reasons, that's okay. But we're always, I think, ultimately concerned about that information being used against us, for negative purposes. Any thoughts around how you're dealing with that?
Well, I mean, I think the data, we need to be sensitive to the data itself and to that information. I think there's a lot of discussion going on at a national level as to how do you treat the patient in a holistic way if you don't incorporate that data. And so caregivers are saying, from a treatment perspective, it's fairly obvious we need to know that information. I think, we as an organization look at that information and say, there is a way to incorporate it and to keep it secure and to recognize the sensitivity of it. But from a treatment perspective, we really believe that there's much more value in including it than excluding it.
Yeah, and I think what that affirms is this, the underlying tenet of, do no harm, doing good, and having a full sort of picture. The only way that that's achievable is if you match patients correctly and deliver that information. But if I'm correct in understanding, what you're saying is you're handing off that responsibility appropriately to the clinicians and the services to say, is this information that should be shared? And, we're going to facilitate the rules that you create to protect those patients appropriately. Is that a fair?
Absolutely. That's correct. Yeah, I did a lot of work as a CIO in the area of opioid addiction and with the PDMPs. And there's a lot of barriers right now to sharing that information around substance abuse and other things across state lines and between states. But those are breaking down. And we had a 3-state, group here in the Midwest that was cooperating and sharing information about that. But we need some federal guidance and some federal leadership to allow us to be able to share this information, whether it's substance abuse or behavioral health data. We're going to need some federal guidance on how to do that. But in the meantime, we are fully supportive of getting clinicians the information they need to make the proper decisions.
Right. So essentially being a facilitator in the process, but, being supportive of whatever policies are put in place, because this is a complex subject. I mean, I know as a physician, I want access to all the information because, I know it's a terrible thing to say, but sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And without it being presented, how can you make that determination? And I always come from the principle of good. I think it's protecting for the negative outcomes. And, that's a much harder problem to solve. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Just any parting thoughts on what the future holds? Any thoughts on some of the upcoming regulations? I know we keep hearing about this pending announcement of, the release of information or the requirements for release. There's a lot of people upset, it would appear, about that. And anything that you feel that you want to just highlight before we have to close out?
I do participate on the leadership committee of the Sequoia Project, which has been involved at a national level with, data sharing, patient data sharing across the entire spectrum of the healthcare community. The ONC has published its goals just recently, and we're going through those and making comments on those as a go-forward strategy. I think everybody's on the same page, which is we want universal access to information. We want to have a sharing of information on a need-to-know basis, of course. But and how do you support that on a national level? So NextGate's actively involved in those discussions, and we will continue to be to help with policy decisions around patient data sharing across providers and across regions.
Fantastic. Well, I think exciting times. I'm certainly looking forward to the announcement. I think
agree with you 100%. The ability to share that information is an essential component. I love this concept of putting the patient at the center of this whole program, and I think that's one of the key assets that NextGate brings to that. Putting the patient and specifically all their data accurately tied together, or blended, as I like to say, appropriately, I think is, it's exciting. And just remains for me to sort of close by thanking NextGate for sponsoring that whiskey tasting that will take place. Everybody's got an opportunity to participate, so make sure you go to the links. You can sign up and you can join Vince and I. We'll be romping through the Highlands tasting Scotch at HIMSS. Vince, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much, Dr. Nick.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, The Incrementalist, or share with me at DrNick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.